All of this data that got stolen, whether it's SolarWinds or any of these other attacks, it's encrypted. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. I always enjoy this time when we get to share and talk about cybersecurity, and more importantly, what does it mean to be a world-class Chief Information Security Officer? I'd like to, with this episode, sort of talk about the current cyber crisis that we're currently in. And I know you might sort of think it's tongue-in-cheek because I got my book, right? But in reality, it has nothing to do with the book, whether we like it or not. We are truly in the midst of a cyber crisis. If you look at what's happening, that's frightening. But if you look at what's going to happen, it's even more frightening. So let's just sort of take a quick preview. Even if we just go back to a little less than a year ago, we saw a new trend starting with SolarWinds. And the idea behind SolarWinds is, instead of targeting individual entities and individual companies, why don't we identify a common software vendor that all of them use? And as an attacker, we spend all of our time, energy, and effort breaking into that software vendor, putting in malicious backdoors, and then going in and just letting the software be distributed to all those vendors. And boom, we now have access to all of those different entities. So we saw how effective SolarWinds was in terms of identifying the government entities and even commercial entities that they wanted to break into, looking at a common vendor that all of them use, and attacking and going after that vendor. Now, when most people looked at SolarWinds, the data point they took away was third-party compromise, third-party vendors. If we can go after a third party and compromise them, we get hundreds or thousands of entities that the attacker can now go after. But I want to give it a little more closer examination. There was actually a little more thought behind it. It wasn't that they just randomly picked SolarWinds. It wasn't that they just said, let's just try one vendor. This was careful analysis. And this is one of the big themes as a CISO that you need to make sure your executives understand. The entities that are operating today have commercialized cyber criminal activity. It's no longer random folks, one-off entities, script kiddies, right? High schoolers in the summer and after school just hacking for fun. It is commercial companies that are looking how they can monetarily benefit from cybercrime activity. So based on everything we've seen, I truly believe that these attackers did market analysis. They went in and said, okay, what are the entities that we want to get access to? And we list them out. Let's go in and start doing some analysis on what software they run. If you do some checking on social media posts, government, especially with government sites, government procurement bids, government wins, you can start to figure out the software that's running at a large percent of government entities and companies. So this isn't terribly hard. Market analysis. So they build out this big spreadsheet that says, okay, here's all the entities we want to target. Here's all the software they have. What's commonality? What is the one piece of software that they're all running? And there were multiple candidates. Then they went out and they started targeting and going after all these different entities and said, okay, which one is the easiest and most straightforward to break into? And ultimately, it was SolarWinds. So we've gone in and seen that by trusting and letting third parties have full access to your network is not a good thing. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. Those that don't learn from the past are forced to repeat it. Because this is SolarWinds, you can argue, is Target 2.0. Like, this is the same exact issue that happened with Target over 5 years ago. They had a vendor. Now, in that case, it was even a little more bizarre because it wasn't even a software vendor. Right? With Target, it was a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, an HVAC vendor. Basically, not only had full access to every one of Target's stores, but they had access to every point of sale register in every store. That's crazy. I mean, talk about an open, flat network. So what we did, we got a lot of business after Target because highly segmented networks work. So we went in and we would put in a switch in each of the stores that basically would isolate the store from any other store and from corporate. It would only allow limited authorized traffic, and it would put every point of sale, every register on its own isolated system. So now, if somebody broke in to an HVAC vendor, they couldn't get to any of the stores. And even if somebody got into the store, they couldn't get into any of the registers. So this concept of highly segmented and isolated networks, least privilege, least privilege, least privilege, or one of the golden rules of firewalls I've been teaching for over 20 years, was any external connections coming outside of the organization, whether it's untrusted third parties, it doesn't matter, must be firewall filtered and isolated from the rest of the network. Golden rule, right? Something we knew about for 20 years. It's just common sense doesn't make common practice. So one of the first things we want to do as chief information security officers is make sure that our executives recognize supply chain attacks as the new normal. That's how they're going to get into companies. Why target one company, break in, only to have to do all the work to break into another company, when in reality, you could break into one vendor, and because people aren't following the golden rules and common sense doesn't make common practice, they're not isolating or segmenting out their network. So now the question is this: how segmented is your environment? Do all third-party vendors get isolated and limited access? Do you have highly segmented endpoints, servers, systems? If yes, are you sure? Right? Because I find really good, smart security people, right? They love to go, oh, yeah, of course we're doing that. Of course we're doing that. And in reality, they're not. Or more likely than not, they think they're doing it and they're not. Oh, yeah, a vendor told me we were set. No. Check, verify, validate. Very few of our clients are truly segmenting at the level that they should. Remember, cybersecurity, if it's done correctly, should never negatively impact the business. But here's the part everybody misses. Businesses, if done correctly, should not negatively impact security. Right. That's a good one. Write that one down. Right. That's super important. Right. So we want to make sure as we're implementing cybersecurity that it doesn't negatively impact the business. And that's one of the golden rules of security. If security negatively impacts the business, security is wrong. Right. Can't do that. However, in a lot of companies, in the name of business, we must have full access to everything. We must allow people access. Whenever people say that one, I'm like, okay, where's the buzzer? I'm buzzing you out, right? Not true, right? So we tend to go in and think that we need all this open, unfettered access. Anyone can access anything, anytime, any place, when in reality, it's not needed. And business is negatively impacting cybersecurity. If done correctly, any person, any entity should be given the least amount of access they need to do their job. Nothing more, nothing less. So I'm not going to negatively impact your business. The vendors can access just what they need, but I'm not going to let your business negatively impact security by giving them too much access and more than absolutely is required. So do you truly have an isolated, segmented network that is limiting and controlling who can access what, in which you're monitoring and tracking all activity? So that's one of the first big takeaways of this edition of Life of a CISO is you want to go in and make sure executives understand one of the biggest threats to to their organization, a supply chain. Just want to take a quick break. I hope you're enjoying the show. I have this free webinar that I would love for you to check out if you want to become a world-class CISO. And you need to recognize how well you're segmenting. Now, the good part is most companies, their IT infrastructure, their switches and routers and technology that they have in place fully supports segmentation. It fully supports the isolation. It fully supports this capability. So in most cases, you don't need to buy anything new. It's not buying a lot of new stuff. It's using what you already have. And to me, that's one of the other big messages in cyber. When there's problems, when there's issues, everybody wants to chase the shiny little object. I have clients of mine that have spent in the last year millions upon millions of dollars on new cybersecurity that used all the latest buzzwords that were out there. And I looked at them and I said, okay, do you realize the tech that you already have, you're only utilizing 20%? And it could have solved this problem. But here's the bigger issue. Why are companies really struggling when it comes to cybersecurity? Why are they really not detecting, preventing, and stopping? It's very, very simple. They have too much tech and not enough people. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I don't know of any entity where they go, Eric, we have security people that leave at 2 o'clock because there's nothing for them to do. We don't have any new projects where we're 100% aligned. No. The issue is that you have technology that's generating alerts right now, but you don't have enough people responding to it. I always laugh whenever there's a breach, right? Whenever there's an attack, you always have a couple of vendors go, okay, listen, I just want to be clear. Our technology caught the attack. Our technology detected the attack. The company ignored it, and the company didn't do anything about it, but our technology worked, and we actually found it. We can catch advanced threats. Couple of problems. I could build technology that alerts on everything. Everything that comes in, attack, 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 attack. Now, technically, I'm catching the attack, right? So it is technically correct. If I alert on every possible traffic, I actually did catch the attack. The problem is there's so many false positives in there that it really is useless to us. So you have a lot of these technologies that are alerting, but because there's so many noise or there's so many alerts, you can't have enough people responding. So let's get this straight. Right now, today, your technology is generating 20,000 alerts, but your current team can only handle 200. How well do you think that's going to work? Right? After a week, you're already almost 50, 60,000 alerts behind. You're going to miss the good stuff. So instead of retuning and reusing what we have, the idea is let's spend $1 million on getting more stuff in. So now check this out. Instead of generating 20,000 alerts in which our team can only respond to 200, we just spent $1 million. So now we're getting 60,000 alerts where our team can only respond to 200. Better or worse, right? We made the problem worse. So as a good chief information security officer, you want to go in and make sure that you're using and tuning everything you have before you buy new. If your team can only handle 200 alerts, then you better tune your stuff to only alert on the 200 highest priority items out there. But Eric, if we do that, aren't we missing some stuff? Yes, but right now you're missing everything. So which would you rather? Miss everything or catch the 200 most critical, highest priority attacks to your environment? I'll take the latter. So use what you have before you buy new. All right? So most companies have the infrastructure. Here's the other cool part. And you got to come close because I don't want the CIO to hear this. What's cool about segmentation is somebody else is going to do it. Right? That's really an IT function. It's not a security function. Oh, Eric, but IT is busy. Okay, here's the game. And I don't mind saying it publicly because it's legit. So you go to your executives with the CIO in the room, and you say the highest priority item right now, with all the supply chain attacks that are out there, is our environment is wide open and it's not segmented. So if somebody gets into the organization, they could cause significant damage. We want to go in and highly segment the environment. One of the first things the CIO is going to say, whoa. Switches, those are ours. You can't touch them. Okay. Do we all agree this is the highest priority item and that we need to segment our environment to fix it? Yes. So either security can do it or IT can do it, but you tell us. And the CIO is going to be like, no one's touching our switches. No one's reconfiguring those. We'll take care of it. That's the trick. The way you expand your team is by recognizing that security is integrated into all aspects of the business and engage the other business units. Get the CIO and IT to work with you as a trusted partner in order to do that. Now, here's the cool part. By doing a highly segmented environment will not only increase the overall security, but it will also increase the efficiency of the switch. So now you get a double win. You get increased security and increased performance and benefit. So that's one of the first things based on the attacks that are out there today that you want to get the message across. Next message. These attacks that we're seeing right now, I'm not saying in the future, but right now are not advanced. They very well could be done by an advanced adversary. They're being done by well-funded organizations, right? These are companies that are doing cyber criminal activity. But the attack vectors they're using to get in are preventable measures. And that's really, really important, because one of the problems I've seen out there today is when these big attacks happen, big tech is covering their butts. My personal favorite was after SolarWinds came out, and you go in and big tech was hit and they had vulnerabilities, and everyone said, what happened? What happened? And they're like, we don't know what happened. It's going to take months before we figure out what actually happened. We don't know what happened. But then a day later, they go, this attack was one of the most sophisticated attacks we've ever seen. It took, and I love this one, thousands of developers, thousands of hours, thousands of years, right, to develop this thing. This was the most advanced piece of malware we've ever seen on the planet. Okay, so how did they get in and how does it work? Well, we don't know yet. Well, how do you know it's the most advanced piece of malware you've ever seen if you don't know how it got in? If you don't know how it worked, if you don't know how it attacked, right? This isn't making sense here, right? You're making these claims, but you don't have the data to answer the simple questions. And then all the dust settles, and everyone thinks, oh, advanced attacks, there's really nothing you can do a lot about this. So you just sort of have to deal with it. And then very quietly and silently, several months later, and this never gets picked up, I don't know why, it turns out, we're pretty sure one of the contributing factors, if not the contributing factor, to the attackers getting into SolarWinds was an intern set up a weak password on our system. Wait. So you now want me to believe that compromising a weak password on a server that's accessible from the internet requires thousands of hours of thousands of people, right? To get, like, really? I mean, what kind of password cracking tools are you using? Right? Cracking passwords is pretty easy and pretty simple, right? But that part never made it out there. So as a world-class CISO, you need to filter out the BS, get to the root cause, and communicate that to the executives. And the message to the executives is good news, bad news. Good news. The attacks we're seeing today and that are happening are absolutely preventable. They absolutely can be prevented. The bad news is, like many companies and many entities, including big tech, we are vulnerable today. So we can take action and we can minimize, reduce, or stop the damage, or we could just be another victim. It's really your choice. And first thing we need to do is we need to go in and segment out our environment. We need to work with IT to create a highly segmented environment. So if and when an attack happens, it's controlled, it's isolated, and most importantly, they cannot get to our critical data or critical information. Now, I'm going to cover next one of the secret for an effective CISO that nobody's talking about. And it's this. All of this data that got stolen, whether it's SolarWinds or any of these other attacks, it's encrypted. All this data is encrypted data. How do I know? Because many of it is required by law based on PII, PHI, and others to be encrypted. So nobody ever caught this, which boggles my mind. If the data is encrypted correctly, yet they're still breaking in, stealing the data, and basically the encryption is doing absolutely nothing to protect the data, something's wrong. There's a problem here. It's like you go in when banks are robbed. When banks were robbed, I always would ask the question, how in the world were they able to get in with those safes? Because I've been to banks when I was a kid, right? And you used to go in, you see the big safe, right? With the big numbers and and I'm like, wow, that looks intimidating. And I would always go in and say, how are these robbers able to go and break in and get past that safe within minutes? You know what the answer was? The safe was open. That's why robbers rob banks when they're open, because the safe is not locked. The safe does absolutely nothing to protect the money if it's not locked and secured, right? And that's the problem. What everyone's missing is this. We are storing our crypto keys with the data. That's like writing the combination to the safe on the outside of the safe. That's like putting a key to your house under the floor mat. It doesn't accomplish anything. So the other thing that a CISO needs to do is redesign and re-architect your cryptographic solution. And the good news is it's simple. All cryptographic keys must be stored on a separate server, and the keys never, ever leave the server. If companies did that, most of these attacks we're seeing would also have been prevented. Because if an attacker breaks in and gets access to your critical data, but it's encrypted and the keys are stored on a separate server that they can't access, that would have also stopped them. So that's the other piece of the equation that I think is a very, very important one. We're deploying technology, cryptographic solutions to check a box, and they're completely being deployed incorrectly and misconfigured. Yet everyone's overlooking that. Nobody's saying, wait, maybe, just maybe, we need to take a look at this. Maybe we need to spend some time fixing that problem. Everyone is missing the most obvious root cause problem, which is our cryptographic keys are stored with the data, which provides minimal to no protection. So that's the other part of all these attacks out there that a world-class CISO needs to focus on is protect the keys. Protect and secure the keys. So then we have SolarWinds supply chain, and we covered the key things a world-class CISO does. Then we move to Colonial Pipeline. Colonial Pipeline was a ransomware attack that went after critical infrastructure. Once again, this wasn't coincidental. This wasn't random. The attacker said, we want ransom payments, so we need to find a company that requires uptime availability. That if their critical infrastructure or systems are down or not operational, they can't function, and they're going to lose so much money that paying the ransom is a no-brainer. Because they're losing $20 million a day, and we only want $5 million ransom. That's a no-brainer. So they went in, and they looked at a lot of critical infrastructure, and of course, they found vulnerable systems and servers. And they were able to break into Colonial and take control of their control systems. Once again, fundamental rules are being violated. When we design any critical system, critical infrastructure, healthcare, or others, the rule is this. Any critical systems that run oil, gas, electricity, nuclear, they must always be air-gapped on a separate isolated network. which means there's no possible way that systems can be accessible from the internet. No possible way. Air gap, which, by the way, air gapped means air gapped, physical disconnection. I worked on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission cyber guidelines, and one of the things was nuclear reactors must never, ever, 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 under any circumstance, be connected to any other network, total, completely isolated. That's why you haven't seen any attacks against nuclear reactors, because unless somebody physically breaches the perimeter with guards with guns, they're not getting to those systems. There's no possible way those systems are accessible from the internet. Now, what cracks me up is people think they can change definitions and it's okay. So I hear clients all the time, oh, it's okay because these systems have an air gap that's connected to the internet. An air gap can't be connected to the internet. So you can't go in and say that we're now going to redefine the term and say air gap means a system that's connected to the internet with a firewall. Right? You can't do that. Right? I've seen these presentations where, all of our critical infrastructure is air gapped. No, they're not. They're connected to the internet. Oh, Eric, we're using air gap connectivity to the internet. I'm like, you're talking, right? Crazy talk, right? So you can't do that. So next thing for a world-class CISO, if you're in critical infrastructure, you need to go in and make sure that any of your critical infrastructure is air gap, no connectivity, no exception, right? Every time companies have made exceptions, it always has ended badly for them. So you want to make sure that you're going in and air gapping those systems. So now we have supply chain and we have ransomware. And then what we've seen recently is sort of these two together. Kaseya is a vendor of software that is used by MSSPs. And they went in and now they broke into that one vendor. So now they have all the MSSPs. And then they did a ransomware attack once again, though, commercializing cyber criminal activity. They initially went in and said, okay, every one of your customers' data that we now have encrypted and we're holding ransom, they need to pay a small amount of money. I think maybe it was like 50 or 75,000. And then they said, wait a second, we're going to give you a volume discount because we're a company and we want to do business with you. So instead of making thousands of customers pay $75,000, we'll give you group discount. If you give us, and once again, I forget the exact amount, but if you give us $8 million, we'll give you a universal key to everything. So you want a group discount where you protect all your customers, give us one lump fee. Otherwise, every single one of your customers is going to be inconvenience. If that's not commercialization of cyber criminal activity, right, I don't know what is. But that's the new trend. So once again, you need to make sure that you're not only very careful of your vendors and doing vendor inventory, but you're also very careful of where is your critical data, how is it protected, how is it controlled, and how is it managed. So as a world-class CISO, are you explaining this trend to your executives? Do your executives understand supply chain attacks? Do they understand ransomware? Do they understand the new trend is merging together? Do they understand that you currently have vulnerabilities and exposures because your data isn't backed up? It's not encrypted correctly, and you don't have proper segmentation. And do you have a plan to go in and present that to the executives so you can address and fix this problem? World-class CISOs are proactive, and random CISOs are reactive. I urge you to take the information from this Life of a CISO episode and be proactive, talk to your executives, and make a difference in the world of cybersecurity.